Watch this till the end to see what happens next. You won't believe how one moment of anger turned into a legal nightmare no one saw coming. It started on a quiet Tuesday evening in Maple Ridge Estates, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed like military haircuts and mailboxes lined up like obedient soldiers. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and chlorine from backyard pools. Nothing dramatic ever happened here, until the crash. Daniel Harper had just pulled into his driveway, engine humming low, hands still tight on the steering wheel. His pickup truck, midnight blue, slightly dusty from a long workday, rolled to a stop. He noticed a bright orange sticker slapped across his windshield. Violation notice. He blinked at it. Parking infraction. Commercial vehicle in residential zone. Fine, $250. Daniel exhaled slowly. His truck wasn't commercial. It had his company's magnetic logo on the door. Removable, temporary. He peeled the sticker off carefully, jaw clenching. Across the street, curtains shifted, and then she appeared. Margaret Klein, HOA president, self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge. She stepped off her porch with the confidence of someone who believed rules were oxygen. Late 50s, sharp bob haircut, pearl necklace, clipboard tucked under her arm. Even from a distance, Daniel could see her lips pressed into that familiar thin line. "You received the notice, I assume," she called out, voice cutting through the still air. Daniel walked toward her slowly. "Yeah, I did. You've been warned twice already," she continued. "Commercial branding violates Section 8B of the Community Guidelines." "It's a magnet," he replied, holding up the removable panel from his door. "I take it off at night." She didn't even glance at it. "The truck was parked here at 3:17 p.m. with visible signage. I have photographic evidence." Daniel felt heat rising up his neck. He worked 12-hour shifts to afford living here. He followed the rules. Mostly. "Margaret, it's a pickup truck. Half the neighborhood drives one. But they don't advertise." The way she said it, calm, controlled, almost smug, made something inside him snap. "Do you ever stop?" Daniel asked quietly. "Do you ever think maybe people are just trying to live?" Her eyes hardened. "I think people agree to community standards when they sign contracts." Behind them, doors cracked open. Neighbors watching. Always watching. Daniel turned back toward his driveway. "I'll deal with it." Margaret's heels clicked against the pavement as she followed him a few steps. If it's not resolved within 24 hours, the fine doubles. And that was it. That was the spark. Daniel stopped walking. Slowly turned around. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." The air shifted. You know that feeling right before a thunderstorm? Heavy. Charged. "Double it," Daniel muttered. "Go ahead." He climbed into his truck, slammed the door harder than necessary. The engine roared alive. Margaret stepped back instinctively. Daniel reversed quickly, too quickly. Tires screeched against pavement. And then, crunch. The sound was violent. Metal against metal. Glass exploding. Daniel's truck jolted. He froze. Margaret's silver Lexus, parked neatly at the curb, now had a crumpled front bumper. The headlights shattered, pieces scattering across the street like glittering ice. Silence swallowed everything. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Margaret stared at her car in disbelief. Her face drained of color, then flushed deep red. "You did that on purpose," she screamed. Daniel stepped out, hands shaking. "It was an accident. It was deliberate," she shouted, voice shrill enough to draw more neighbors onto their lawns. Phones appeared. Cameras raised. Daniel looked around, realizing how bad this looked. The argument. The sudden acceleration. The impact. "I didn't mean to hit it," he insisted, but even he heard the weakness in his tone. Margaret walked toward him slowly, eyes blazing. "You just committed property damage. Criminal damage. Call insurance," he said, trying to steady himself. "We'll handle it like adults." She let out a cold laugh. "Oh no, we're not handling this quietly." Her phone was already in her hand. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Margaret, don't do this." But she was already speaking to someone. "Yes, I'd like to report vandalism." Vandalism. That word echoed in Daniel's mind. It sounded intentional, malicious. Within minutes, red and blue lights flickered at the end of the street. Neighbors whispered. Someone zoomed in with their camera. Daniel stood there, hands on his hips, trying to replay the moment in his head. Had he pressed the gas too hard? Was he trying to scare her? Did anger guide his foot? What would you do in that situation? When someone pushes you again and again until the pressure explodes. Two officers stepped out of the patrol car. Margaret walked toward them immediately, gesturing dramatically at her damaged Lexus. Daniel watched her speak, animated, pointing at him. One of the officers approached Daniel. "Sir, we need to ask you a few questions." The tone was neutral, professional, but Daniel's chest tightened. "I didn't do it on purpose," he said quickly. The officer glanced at the truck, then at the Lexus. "We'll sort that out." Behind them, Margaret crossed her arms, satisfaction flickering across her face. But what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that this moment wasn't the end of her control. It was the beginning of something far bigger. Because while she believed she had just crushed a rule breaker, she had no idea the law was about to look much closer at her. And when it did, Maple Ridge Estates would never be the same. But that revelation, it was still hidden. For now, watch this till the end, because what happened the next morning changed everything and exposed far more than a damaged car. Daniel barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it again, the crunch of metal, the pop of shattering glass. He replayed Margaret's accusation over and over. Vandalism. The word stuck like a splinter in his mind. By sunrise, Maple Ridge Estates looked deceptively peaceful. Birds chirped. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically. Joggers passed by with earbuds in, pretending nothing dramatic had happened just 12 hours earlier. But Daniel knew better. His phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m. Unknown number. "Mr. Harper?" A firm voice asked when he answered. "Yes. This is Officer Ramirez. We reviewed the preliminary report from last night. We'll need you to come down to the station today to give a formal statement." Daniel swallowed. "Am I being charged?" "Not at this time. But there's additional context we need to discuss." Additional context. That phrase lingered long after the call ended. Across the street, Margaret stood in her driveway, arms folded, speaking to a man in a Navy suit, her insurance adjuster. She glanced toward Daniel's house once, her expression unreadable. Daniel felt anger rise again, but this time it was different, controlled, focused. He stepped back inside and opened his laptop. If she wanted to escalate this, fine. He'd protect himself. Daniel remembered something important. 2 weeks ago, after a package theft in the neighborhood, he installed a dash cam. It recorded front and rear views automatically whenever the engine ran. His heart pounded as he pulled the memory card. If the camera caught the argument, if it showed the exact moment of impact. He inserted the card into his computer. The screen flickered. There it was. Time-stamped. Clear. The footage showed Margaret approaching his truck. Clipboard visible. Audio crisp. "You've been warned twice already." The argument played out exactly as he remembered. Then came the critical seconds. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. In the footage, as he reversed, Margaret stepped forward. Not backward. She moved closer to the truck's path. Daniel froze. She hadn't simply been standing by her Lexus. She had walked toward his vehicle, almost as if. No, he replayed it, frame by frame. Margaret took 3 steps forward. Her hand lifted slightly, as if gesturing or provoking. Then Daniel's truck jolted backward. The collision happened faster than it felt in real time. Daniel's breathing slowed. This wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. He grabbed his phone and called his friend Marcus, a local attorney. "You're not going to believe this," Daniel said. An hour later, Marcus sat at Daniel's kitchen table, watching the footage carefully. "She moved," Marcus muttered. "That's what I'm saying." Marcus paused the video, zoomed in, enhanced brightness. Margaret's face was visible, focused, intense. "She stepped toward the truck after you started reversing," Marcus said slowly. "That complicates things. Complicates. It suggests shared liability, maybe even provocation." Daniel exhaled sharply. "So I'm not crazy." "No, but here's the bigger issue." Marcus leaned back. "Why would she do that?" Daniel didn't answer, because deep down he knew Margaret thrived on control, on enforcement, on proving points. But stepping toward a moving vehicle? That was risky. unless she believed she'd win no matter what. Marcus looked at him seriously. Did you know she's been involved in lawsuits before? Daniel blinked. What? Small claims. Disputes with residents. Aggressive fine collections. I've heard her name. That was new. Across the street, Margaret finished speaking with the adjuster and walked back into her house. Daniel stared at her front door. Something wasn't right. By noon, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded with posts. Did anyone see what happened? I heard it was intentional. HOA rules are getting out of control. Screenshots of the damaged Lexus circulated. Margaret posted a statement. Reckless behavior will not be tolerated in Maple Ridge Estates. The board will pursue all legal remedies. Daniel read it twice. Reckless. Legal remedies. She wasn't backing down. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Upload the footage. Back it up everywhere. Daniel nodded. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the neighborhood security system, the one funded by HOA dues. Community camera footage available for review. Daniel frowned. Maple Ridge had street cameras at both entrances. He logged in using his resident credentials. The incident time appeared in the archive. He clicked play. The angle wasn't perfect, but it showed the street clearly. Margaret's Lexus. Daniel's truck. Margaret walking. Daniel leaned closer. The camera captured something subtle, something the dashcam hadn't. Just seconds before the collision, Margaret looked directly at a neighbor's house, specifically at a mounted camera, and she smiled. Not a big smile, just a quick, tight one. Daniel's stomach dropped. She knew, he whispered. Knew what? Marcus asked. She knew there were cameras. They watched again. Margaret stepped forward. Collision. Immediate dramatic reaction. Hands on head. Daniel felt cold. What if she wanted this, he said. Marcus didn't answer right away. If she intentionally positioned herself and her car to trigger a claim, he began carefully, that's insurance fraud. The word hit harder than vandalism ever had. Fraud. Daniel stared at the pause frame. Margaret mid-step, expression calculated. Across the street, her blinds shifted slightly. Was she watching him now? A knock suddenly echoed through Daniel's front door. Both men jumped. Daniel walked cautiously to answer it. Standing there was Officer Ramirez. Mr. Harper, he said calmly. We've reviewed additional footage. Daniel's pulse quickened. And, he asked. The officer's expression was unreadable. There are inconsistencies in the initial complaint. Daniel and Marcus exchanged a look. Inconsistencies how? Daniel pressed. Officer Ramirez glanced toward Margaret's house. Let's just say, this may not be as straightforward as it first appeared. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew. Because if the police were seeing what he saw, then Margaret Klein's control over Maple Ridge Estates was about to crack. And once the law starts asking questions, it doesn't stop easily. There are inconsistencies in the initial complaint. Daniel and Marcus exchanged a look. Inconsistencies how? Daniel pressed. Officer Ramirez glanced toward Margaret's house. Let's just say, this may not be as straightforward as it first appeared. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew. Because if the police were seeing what he saw, then Margaret Klein's control over Maple Ridge Estates was about to crack. And once the law starts asking questions, it doesn't stop easily. Watch this till the end, because the moment the law started digging, the truth began clawing its way to the surface, and what they uncovered shocked the entire neighborhood. Officer Ramirez didn't step inside Daniel's house right away. He stood on the porch, sunlight cutting across his uniform, face calm but intent. We need to speak somewhere private, he said. Daniel nodded and led him into the living room. Marcus remained seated at the kitchen table, arms crossed, legal instincts fully awake. Ramirez removed a small notepad. Mr. Harper, after reviewing both your dashcam footage and the community security recording, we've identified some discrepancies in Ms. Klein's statement. Daniel's heart pounded. Discrepancies how? She claimed she was standing still beside her vehicle when you aggressively reversed into it. Marcus leaned forward. And the footage? It shows her advancing toward your vehicle after the engine was already in motion. Silence thickened the room. Ramirez continued carefully. Additionally, She stated she feared for her safety and had no time to react. However, the video suggests she had several seconds to step back. Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that he wasn't being painted as a reckless criminal. Dread because this was escalating beyond a simple accident. What happens now? Daniel asked. We'll be conducting a formal inquiry, Ramirez replied, including a review of insurance communications. Marcus's eyebrows lifted slightly. Insurance, Daniel repeated. Ramirez met his eyes. There are indications Ms. Klein contacted her insurer less than 3 minutes after the collision. That's not illegal, Marcus said cautiously. No, Ramirez agreed. But the speed suggests preparation. Daniel's stomach twisted. Preparation. Across the street, Margaret's front door opened. She stepped outside, sunglasses on, phone pressed to her ear. Her posture was confident, almost defiant. Ramirez noticed her too. We'll also need to examine prior claims, he added quietly. Prior claims? Daniel asked. Ramirez hesitated only briefly. Ms. Klein has filed 3 property damage claims in the past 18 months, all involving disputes with residents. Daniel felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 3? Marcus's tone sharpened. Were any of those claims contested? One is currently under review for inconsistencies. That word again. Inconsistencies. The pieces began aligning in Daniel's mind like dark puzzle fragments. Margaret's obsession with rule enforcement. Her constant documentation. The way she had stepped forward instead of back. Had this happened before? Ramirez closed his notebook. For now, you're not being charged. But I advise you not to discuss this publicly. Daniel nodded. As the officer left, Marcus turned to him. This isn't just about a car anymore. No, Daniel said quietly. It's about power. Because Margaret didn't just enforce rules. She thrived on them. Controlled the board. Controlled fines. Controlled narratives. But what if that control had gone too far? By afternoon, word had spread faster than wildfire. Someone leaked that the police were reviewing footage. The neighborhood Facebook group shifted tone dramatically. Wait, she moved toward the truck. Has anyone else had issues with claims? My fence damage dispute suddenly makes more sense. Daniel watched the comments roll in. Stories emerged, small at first. A mailbox incident, a cracked garden statue, a scratch bumper, each followed by insurance claims, each involving Margaret. The pattern felt heavier with every post. At 5:42 p.m., Daniel's doorbell rang again. This time it wasn't police. It was Tom Henderson, a retired engineer who lived 2 houses down. Tom rarely involved himself in drama. But today his face looked troubled. I saw the video, Tom said quietly after Daniel let him in. And there's something you should know. Daniel braced himself. Last year, Tom continued, Margaret claimed my ladder fell against her car during a storm. Insurance paid out. But my ladder was locked in my garage. Daniel's eyes widened. Did you fight it? I tried, but she had photos and witnesses. Witnesses? Tom nodded slowly. Board members. A chill slid down Daniel's spine. Tom, are you saying? I'm saying, Tom interrupted, voice low. She knows how to build a narrative. Marcus re-entered the room, having overheard enough. If multiple residents testify to a pattern, this becomes something much larger. Daniel leaned against the wall, mind racing. Outside, Margaret stepped onto her porch again, watching small clusters of neighbors speaking in hushed tones. For the first time since Daniel moved to Maple Ridge Estates, she didn't look untouchable. She looked irritated. Then her phone rang. She answered, and her composure cracked. Even from across the street, Daniel could see it. Her shoulders stiffened. Her pacing quickened. Her voice rose sharply. She turned away from the street, but not before Daniel caught the expression on her face. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. What if the insurance company is investigating? Daniel whispered. Marcus nodded. If they suspect stage damage, that's felony territory. Felony. The word carried weight. Finality. Margaret suddenly slammed her front door shut. Moments later, a black sedan pulled into her driveway. 2 men stepped out. Not police. Not neighbors. They wore dark suits. Daniel felt his pulse spike again. What now? Tom murmured. Across the street, Margaret greeted the men stiffly. They showed identification. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let them in. Daniel exhaled slowly. The law had officially arrived at her door. But investigations take time. Truth unfolds in layers. And sometimes, when someone fights to protect their power, they make one last desperate move. That night, as darkness settled over Maple Ridge Estates, Daniel received a message that made his blood run cold. A single text from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. And suddenly, this wasn't just about justice. It was about retaliation. And someone was clearly not done fighting. Because when someone who's losing control decides to fight back, the damage can spread far beyond a broken car. And this time, it got personal. Daniel stared at the text message for a long time. You should have stayed quiet. No name, no emoji, no explanation. Just a threat dressed as advice. His first instinct was anger. His second was something colder. Fear. Marcus read it twice. Don't respond. I wasn't planning to. Good. We document everything from here on out. Daniel nodded, but his thoughts were racing. The timing wasn't random. Investigators show up at Margaret's house. Neighbors begin sharing stories. And suddenly he receives this? Coincidence didn't feel likely. Across the street, Margaret's house remained dark longer than usual that night. No porch light, no movement behind curtains. It felt like the calm before a storm. The next morning, Daniel walked outside to find something that made his stomach drop. Spray painted across his garage door in thick red letters. Criminal. The paint dripped down like blood. His chest tightened. Neighbors stood in their driveways whispering. Phone's already out. Daniel clenched his jaw. What would you do in that moment? When the neighborhood you worked so hard to live in starts turning into a battlefield. He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He took pictures. Then he called the police. Officer Ramirez arrived within 20 minutes. He examined the graffiti carefully. This escalated quickly, Ramirez said. You think it's connected? Daniel asked. Ramirez didn't answer directly. We'll check nearby camera footage. As if on cue, Tom walked over again. His expression was grim. I have something, Tom said quietly. Daniel looked at him. My driveway camera picked up movement around 2:13 a.m. Daniel's pulse quickened. And Tom hesitated. It's not clear. Hoodie, gloves. But what? The person walked from Margaret's side of the street. Daniel felt heat surge through him. Are you sure? I'm sure of the direction, Tom replied. Not the identity. Ramirez took note of everything. If we can establish intimidation tied to an ongoing investigation, the officer said, that carries serious consequences. Daniel glanced toward Margaret's house. The blind shifted. She was watching again. By noon, the black sedan from the previous day returned. This time, it stayed parked longer. Two investigators stepped out with folders in hand. Margaret met them outside. Daniel couldn't hear the conversation, but body language tells stories words don't. Her arms moved sharply, defensive. One investigator remained calm, occasionally writing something down. At one point, Margaret threw her hands in the air. Then came the moment no one expected. Another police cruiser pulled up. Neighbors gasped audibly. Daniel felt his heart pound in his ears. Officer Ramirez stepped out. Margaret's posture stiffened. The investigators exchanged glances with Ramirez. Paperwork changed hands. Margaret's face turned pale. She shook her head repeatedly. No, she mouthed. Daniel watched from across the street, barely breathing. This wasn't about a car anymore. It was about fraud, intimidation, abuse of authority. Ramirez spoke steadily, his tone firm but controlled. Margaret's composure cracked. She pointed across the street. At Daniel. Even from a distance, he could read her lips. This is his fault. The words carried no power anymore. Not when evidence was stacking up. Not when neighbors were stepping forward. One by one, doors opened. Residents gathered silently along the sidewalks. Witnesses. Margaret looked around at them. And for the first time in years, she wasn't the one in control. She looked small. The investigators handed her documents. She refused at first. Ramirez spoke again. After a tense pause, she took them. Her hands were shaking. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing he'd been holding his breath. Marcus stepped beside him. That's likely a notice of formal investigation and possible charges. Daniel nodded. Across the street, Margaret suddenly locked eyes with him. The anger there was intense. But beneath it, desperation. And desperation makes people unpredictable. As the officials prepared to leave, Margaret snapped. She stormed toward Daniel's yard. Ramirez moved quickly to intercept her. "You've ruined everything," she shouted. Daniel stood still. "I didn't ruin anything," he said calmly. "You did." Her face twisted. "You think this neighborhood will respect you? You think you win?" Daniel took a steady breath. This was never about winning. It was about truth. Margaret laughed, but sounded hollow. Then Ramirez placed a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am, I need you to step back." She froze. For a split second, it looked like she might resist. But then she stepped away. The officials left. Margaret returned to her house without another word. The door slammed. The neighborhood buzzed with quiet conversations. Daniel looked at the red paint still staining his garage. It would wash off, eventually. But reputations? Those take longer. As evening settled, Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He hesitated before opening it. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a message from the HOA board secretary. "Emergency meeting. Tonight, 8 p.m., mandatory attendance." Daniel's pulse quickened. Emergency meetings only happen when something breaks. And something had definitely broken. He looked across the street one last time. Margaret's porch light flickered on. Her silhouette moved behind the curtain. Whatever happened at that meeting would decide everything. And not everyone was going to walk away unscathed. Because the emergency meeting that followed didn't just change one street. It ended a reign no one thought could be challenged. By 7:45 p.m., the Maple Ridge Estates clubhouse was packed. Not politely filled. Packed. Folding chairs scraped against tile floors. Low conversations buzzed like electrical static. People who had avoided HOA meetings for years suddenly showed up. Couples. Retirees. Young families. Even residents who usually stayed silent in the background were front and center. Daniel stood near the back wall, arms crossed, heart steady but alert. Margaret wasn't there yet. The board secretary, Linda Cho, shuffled papers at the front table. She looked nervous, more nervous than Daniel had ever seen her. At exactly 8:02 p.m., the clubhouse doors opened. Margaret stepped inside. No pearl necklace tonight. No clipboard. Just a dark blazer and tight expression. The room went quiet. You could feel the shift. For years, when she walked into a room, people straightened up out of habit, out of fear of fines, citations, lectures. Tonight, no one moved. Linda cleared her throat. This emergency session of the Maple Ridge Estates HOA board is now in order. Her voice trembled slightly. Margaret remained standing instead of taking her usual seat at the center. Before Linda could continue, Margaret spoke. "This meeting is unnecessary," she said sharply. "The situation is being handled." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tom stood up first. "Handled," he repeated. "You call insurance investigations and police involvement handled?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "Allegations are not facts." Daniel stepped forward slightly, not speaking yet, just present. Linda raised a hand. "We need to address several concerns. First, the pending insurance inquiry regarding multiple property claims." A visible flicker crossed Margaret's face. "Second," Linda continued, "the report of possible intimidation toward a resident involved in an active investigation." That landed heavier. Margaret's eyes snapped toward Daniel. "You have no proof," she said coldly. Officer Ramirez, seated quietly near the side wall in plain clothes, finally stood. "Actually, we do." The entire room turned. Ramirez held up a folder. "Surveillance footage from multiple properties confirms coordinated positioning during the collision event. Additionally, forensic analysis of spray paint residue from Mr. Harper's garage is pending." Margaret's composure began to fracture. "This is absurd," she snapped. "I have served this community for 6 years. And during that time," Tom interrupted, "how many claims were filed against neighbors? More residents stood. My fence, my mailbox, my driveway scratch. One by one, voices rose. Not angry, just tired. Tired of control. Tired of fear. Daniel watched Margaret carefully. Power doesn't disappear quietly. It fights. It resists. You all signed agreements, she shouted. Rules protect property value. Linda's voice cut through the chaos. Rules do not permit manipulation. Silence. Heavy and final. Linda slid a document across the table. By majority vote of the board, effective immediately, Margaret Klein is suspended from her position as HOA president pending the outcome of the formal investigation. Gasps filled the room. Margaret didn't touch the paper. You can't remove me without cause. Linda met her gaze. We have cause. Ramirez stepped forward slightly, not threatening, just present. Margaret looked around the room, searching for allies. There were none. For the first time in years, she wasn't commanding the room. She was alone in it. What would you have done? Daniel's voice finally broke the silence. Calm, measured. If someone kept pushing you, Margaret looked at him, anger fading into something else. Regret, or maybe just realization. The investigators entered quietly through the side door. No sirens, no dramatic gestures, just procedure. One of them addressed her directly. Ms. Klein, based on preliminary findings, you are being formally charged with insurance fraud and filing false reports. The words echoed through the clubhouse. Fraud, false reports, the same language she had used against Daniel. Margaret swayed slightly, but steadied herself. This is a mistake, she whispered. The investigator's tone remained neutral. You'll have the opportunity to present your defense. Ramirez guided her gently toward the exit. No handcuffs. Not yet. But the symbolism was unmistakable. As the doors closed behind her, a strange quiet filled the room. No cheering. No applause. Just release. Linda exhaled slowly. We will hold special elections within 30 days. Neighbors began speaking, not in whispers this time, but openly. Ideas. Accountability. Transparency. Daniel stepped outside into the cool night air. The clubhouse lights glowed behind him. The tension that had hovered over Maple Ridge for years felt lighter somehow. Tom joined him. You okay? Tom asked. Daniel nodded. Yeah, I think so. Across the parking lot, Margaret stood beside an unmarked car, speaking quietly with investigators. Her posture no longer rigid, just human. Power had shielded her for years. But the law doesn't recognize titles. It recognizes actions, and actions have consequences. Daniel looked up at the quiet sky. One argument, one collision, one moment of anger. It could have destroyed him. Instead, it exposed something bigger. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive loudly. It builds slowly, frame by frame, truth by truth. And when it finally lands, it lands hard. If this story made you think twice about power, accountability, or what you'd do in the same situation, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories, and tell us in the comments.